All right, everyone. Dee Dee and I have been recording this podcast and sharing it with you with this free tool called Anchor. And it's 100% free for you to do. You can create your own podcast with special tools on their website right from your computer or your phone. It's pretty cool, right, Dee Dee?
You know, what I really love about Anchor is how easy it makes it to distribute your podcast to all the different players that are out there. So Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all the different players. You can just send it on out there.
Yeah, not only does it push it out to all the platforms, but no matter the size of your audience, Anchor is a great place for you to host and produce your podcast. Everything you need is in one place to make it. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. You're listening to
The Classroom Collaborative
podcast with your hosts, Dee Dee Wills,
Ed Rock,
and Adam Peterson.
Here we go.
We're so glad you're here.
Let's get started. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Classroom Collaborative podcast. So excited to be joined again by Mrs. Dee Dee Wills. Dee Dee, how are you?
I am so good. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a while since we've chatted. Everything's been hectic in my life and your life and the world all over.
I know.
It's been a weird, we say that every episode. It's been a weird 2020. Like,
it is.
Soon,
I know.
Hopefully we can stop saying that.
Our lives are chaotic. But I know. No, careful. And then, but you know, teachers I know also are, experiencing that as well. We were going to, those of you listening, we were going to do an episode with the principal, right? Mm-hmm. We were going to talk to the principal. And then what happened, Adam?
She messaged me like 10 minutes before we were supposed to record and said, I'm so sorry, but our school just made the decision to go remote starting tomorrow. And I'm like, oh my, and she apologized that she couldn't be a guest. She goes, I don't think I'd make a very good podcast guest. So I didn't even say, I just said, no worries. Take care of your teachers. Take care of yourself. We'll reschedule.
Yeah. Right. Right. So that's her life, but I'm sure it's a lot of people out there also like, what are we doing today? Are we here today? Right. Are we not going to be here today? And so anyhow, what's up is down and what's down is up, and that's called 2020.
Yeah, there was something I said the other day.
That should be a song.
I'm surprised there hasn't been one yet.
I think it will be. It will be.
I said something the other day about there was something that was bugging me, and it was so small and minor, and I don't remember what it was right now. That's how small it was. And Trisha's like, in the grand scheme of things right now, is that really something that you need to be complaining about? I'm like, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I know. The perfect son always says, first world problems, Mom.
Yeah, right.
First world problem. Yep. You're right. So we were coming up with part 2 of the sight word kind of intervention. What do you do when students aren't picking up on certain skills, right?
Yeah, and I'm so glad that we're doing this. I know last time I learned so much just sitting back and listening to you talk about science of reading and all the training you went through and everything that you've been doing to kind of, I don't know, change your ways, but like change your thought process at that. It was really, really interesting for me. And I know listeners thought the same. And then it's funny because we were going to interview this principal and then she had to cancel. And we were like, let's do another sight word thing. And I was like, you know what? This is perfect, Dee Dee, because I have a brand new student starting in my program tomorrow who is coming to me strictly for reading help. He's a little first grade student who math is nailing it. He's knocking it out of the park. Everything is going smooth for him, but he is just struggling with putting sounds together to make words. And sight words, I did an assessment with him. He did okay, but the assessment I gave him was kind of like a review of kindergarten words. And I was using your Not Yours Mother's sight word stuff and kind of going through that. And it was one of those things that I'm like, all right, I'm so excited to help this little guy.
To do part 2.
Yeah, just to see what he can do. So when we were talking, I'm like, Dee Dee, I need more help. Like, what else you got for me?
What else you got? So just to kind of recap what we talked about last time, those of you who haven't listened, maybe that would be a good one to start with and then come back to this episode. But one of the things that we were talking about is how I've gone through sort of a transformation in my thought process about how people learn to read. Mm-hmm. And that's basically based on the science of reading. So went through a week-long training, was like legitimately intense. It was like you couldn't even play. Like you couldn't answer texts because you were on video the whole time.
I remember calling you and you were like,
can't talk right now.
They're watching us.
Big Brother is watching. So went through this intensive training and had so many aha moments as a result. even prior to going through the training, I was doing, this is how it all started. I started doing research about, what do you do when kids aren't learning? And it really started to show what makes sense, because that's what we're seeing in our classrooms also, is that, in kindergarten, we could kind of power through with sight words, right? Because there might be, depending on your school, 50 to 100 maybe sight words, and students have to, and we're asking them to memorize. And then it's first grade, they have more. They have to remember what they already knew, and then they have to learn more. But what we're seeing is happening, if we look at the trend line, for students who are failing or who are not being successful, it really starts to take its toll in third grade. Because second and third grade is when things really start to kind of come to an end. Because what's happening in those grades is that students are no longer able to guess to figure out the word, because these are words that may be new to them, or they may be words that look like other words. And if the student reads it incorrectly, it changes the meaning of the entire sentence or paragraph, right? So those types of things happen, then comprehension breaks down, and all of a sudden, when we start to really look what's happening, we're seeing these big gaps of knowledge. And one of the big gaps of knowledge is that phonemic awareness skill. So as students' phonemic awareness skills are kind of stunted, if they're not grasping that ability to blend and segment sounds, doesn't matter what else they know, because that's what they need to be able to do when they see letters and sounds. They need to be able to and words. They need to segment those and then put them back together. So if they're encoding or decoding, those are essential skills. And what we're learning is that about 20% of the population out there has some sort of language-based disability. And when we start to look at a classroom of 20 students, we can see that our intervention group has always been in the old way that I taught, 4 to 5 students every single year. These are the students who are not progressing. Yes, they learn, but they're not on speed with the rest of the students. Yes, they make big gains, but they're not catching up. They're just barely hanging in there, right? And so, kindergarten, they do that. And then middle of first grade, they're not doing so well. And then second grade is when things start to fall apart. And third grade was when it's a no-go. Like, that's when we really see it. So what do? We have to change the way that we teach. And we have to have an explicit way that's very predictable, in which we deliver phonics in conjunction with phonemic awareness skills. So those things need to really be on an ongoing basis. No longer do we say, check, they have segmenting. We don't check anymore. We continue to teach it again and again. Check, they understand that the letter H says, doesn't matter that they have that. We need to continue to bring that back into practice so that it is just automatic. And this works for students who are on target, right? They're right where they need to be. This helps them have tremendous gains for those students who don't have a language-based learning issue. But then those students who do have a language-based learning issue, it really helps them.
Well, it's interesting you say that, so we need to keep coming back to it and keep coming back to it and keep teaching it. And that was one thing I noticed doing an eval with this little student of mine, was he could blend auditorily. So when I would say to him, all right, I'm going to say some sounds, you tell me what you hear. At. He could say it perfectly fine. Heard that just fine. But when we got to the actual phonemic awareness side of it or phonics side, I guess, of him putting it together, he knew.
Looking at the letters, but he couldn't get it together.
Like he knew, and even knew the sounds. That was the hardest part. Like he knew k, and he knew and he knew t. But for him on his own to put that together without me saying it first was a whole different ball game. Same thing when it came to blending and segmenting and counting. So if I segmented a word and I said, all right, I'm going to say I don't know, we'll do cat again. So listen to the word cat. Tell me the sounds you hear. And he would say at. He wouldn't break them apart. So he couldn't count the specific number of sounds. And then it got even harder for him as we put, digraphs in or blends or anything. So it is interesting that you say, and I knew this all along, but it's so important that we need to remember that just because they have one piece of it doesn't mean that they're ready to move on.
Have it all. And then what we know as far as the scope and sequence, for phonemic awareness, that onset and rhyme, the k at, is easier than k at. right? So that's what we need to make sure we hit those. So go back and listen to the other episode.
Right.
I think I may or may not have linked. I need to go back and check a replay of a webinar that I did that it'll be an hour in which we're talking about this. But here's what you would do. You have warm-up activities. You have daily review. You need to set aside 30 to 45 minutes to do this on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. This is what we would talk about as a prevention,
right,
not an intervention, right? So this is going to be done whole group, right? And then our students who are needing more access, we would repeat this with them in small group. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So we're going to, like, as if there's an audience there. They're like, yes.
You're teaching me. That's okay, because I'm doing this with my students. So, I'm like, all right, keep telling me.
So we want to make sure that they don't get something necessarily different. They just need to get more.
Right.
And of course, what that more is going to be tailored to the student. So if you're in first grade and most of your class, you've moved beyond sounds, right? Beginning sounds. When you go to that lesson part, you're going to want to dial that back to where the student is, if that makes sense, right? So if it's your whole group, you're talking about vowel teams, but this student hasn't mastered vowels, then you're going to want to make sure that you teach him where he is or she is in that small group. Okay, so this is what whole group would look like. You're going to want to start up with a warm-up. So this is a quick review of 15 to 20 sound cards. They're displayed so the students can see them. Okay, so they're going to be displayed somehow. You could do it with flashcards. They're going to be cards that do not have any pictorial support. So it's not going to have the key picture on there. It's not going to have a C cat, right? Just the letter. And so as you're flashing the cards, the students who respond, B says B, right? And what you're going to want to be mindful as those letters that are the B, T, W sounds, we want to make sure that we don't have the at the end. So it's not ba, it's not ta, it's not wa.
Yeah, my kids do that. It's such a hard one for especially little ones to break. Because if you were in my class, I'd say we don't say duh, Edie, right? Like we say.
Right. Well, some people do, but
duh, Dee
duh, Dee.
So in that warm up, let me ask you this real quick. What do you do for a group of students, or in my case, a one-on-one student who doesn't even have that letter recognition down yet, and we're doing this?
Then you do it with them.
So you say
do it with them.
B, and see if they can say the sound. Because that's one thing I'm running into with one of my kids is I can say the letter, and that cue helps him remember the sound because of stuff he's done with his full-time teacher.
So what you need to do is find out what they know, right? If he knows 15 letters, make sure you include those 15 letters. And then add whatever you're working on that week for that student, whatever your goal sounds are for that week. So you're going to want to take what they know, make sure you overlearn it over and over and over. And then you add those new skills that you're working on, and then you incorporate them in. Okay.
Right.
So one of the things I wanted to say was, if I were in Las Vegas and I was going to lay a bet, like a year's worth of salary, and somebody says, do you say B? Do you, Dee Dee, will say ba? And I would say, are you kidding me? No. Watching a video of myself giving instruction, and I'm ba-ing it all over the place. So I'm all over. So teachers out there, you have the best tool at your disposal. It's called your phone.
Right.
Just go ahead and record your voice, because if you're hearing ba from your students, chances are you might be saying it yourself.
Exactly.
So record yourself. Like I'm telling you, I was like, there's no way in this world that I say ba. I know better. And yet I was doing it. So don't do as I do. So, okay, you're going to 15 to 20 sound cards where you're going to show them, and the student's going to go very quickly. C says k. Now, when you teach the student that C also says s, then they're going to give you both of those sounds. Okay. So they're going to be giving you those sounds.
Are you still, I notice you're saying C says k. You're not giving them a keyword clue. So they're not saying like C cat.
No.
It's just C says this.
Right. Now, when you're teaching them the letter sounds, that's during your phonics instruction. This is more of a review right? So when you're teaching them, okay, friends, let me introduce you today with the word or the letter B, and B says, B, bat, right? So that's how you would do that. You would teach them that. You would have them displayed probably in your classroom like you normally do. That would be a support for students. Because we don't want them to, right, we want them to go, So yes. Now you definitely want to give them that opportunity to learn it that way, right? But then this review is a warm up super fast. Okay. Next we're going to do, so that's all done with a visual response, a visual cue for the students. I made them into PowerPoints because I talked about how there's no way I can handle those cards. PowerPoints make it go really, really fast. You just click to the next slide, even using those.
Yeah,
right?
I was doing my
click to the next one.
And it's even easier because you don't have to store the materials either. You've got it right there on your screen. You just click through it all.
Right. Oh, I know. I'm like, I don't know about you guys, but I'm like a stacker and shuffler. Like I put things and then I'm like, wait a minute, I have it here somewhere. All that is lost instructional time. So after you've done that PowerPoint or a visual, students are seeing the letter and they're decoding, right? That's what they're doing. They're decoding that sound. Now you want them to encode. So now you're going to give them a sound and they're going to say, so for example, if I said, they would say, M says,
Right.
And while they're doing that, we want them to be doing something tactile, right? So maybe you have sand and they're writing the letter in the sand. Maybe they're just doing it in the air. That's an option too, following the right path of motion. Maybe they're doing it with a dry erase marker. Maybe they're doing it with shaving cream, right? All of those things that teachers have been doing forever. Yeah. We want to bring all those multi-sensory things in at this moment. And it's got to be fast. So we're not going to wait for everybody.
Right.
We're going to make sure that we're going at a quick pace. Now, some of your students, as you're doing this, of course, your job is to be looking at the students and seeing who's with me and who has no idea what's going on, right? So that's kind of where but you're going to do 15 to 20 sounds every day.
And how often are you changing out those sounds? So is that a week of the same 15
every
sounds?
Week. Yeah. So the way that we set it up was each week we're adding on another skill. So, week 1, we have 5 sounds. Week 2, we have 8 sounds and so on and so forth. So what you want to be reviewing is the things that you are teaching in this week and everything that they've learned in the past. So Monday, you might have these 20 letters. And Tuesday, you might have these 20 letters, especially as you think about it, when you get to all the letters in the alphabet.
Right.
You're not going to go through them all. So you're going to pick and choose the ones that you need to make sure you go back to. But within that week, you want to make sure you're constantly reviewing. Does that make sense? So that was part of the reason. So in what we did was each week, there's like week 5, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. Week 6, day 1, day 2, because we want to make sure that they're getting exposed to lots of different things. Okay. So we start off with looking at the letter, hearing the letter, and encoding as we decode, encode. And now we're going to be working on blending sounds. So this for kindergarten, this is really going to look like 3 sounds, right? So they can be, and they're going to be blending 15 to 20. I'm doing air quotes. Nobody can see it. Words, right?
It's like, I get it.
Some of them are going to be real words and some of them are going to be nonsense words. And I think I said last time I was of the camp a while ago, if you talk to, 2005, Dee Dee Wills, she would have said, no, we don't do nonsense words. Why would we do that? Except for now we realize, we need those because what are multiple syllable words, but a series of nonsense words put together to make another word, right? So they need to be able to have that. So they're going to do 15 to 20 words in which they're blending 3 sounds. They're going to tap it out. So I'm going to show 3 sounds. Now, teachers, you can do this with cards. If you have letter cards, you can have 3 sounds: consonant, vowel, consonant. You need to be careful of how you have those because if you have, if C-A-N works great. But if the last consonant is an R, we don't want to go k-a-er. Right? Because now we're going to be teaching them that's not right. The AR goes R instead. Or if it's C-I-N, we know that, I don't know if that's the right example. We want to make sure, because we don't want to make sure if we're working on the hard C versus the soft C. So you don't want to give them something there that would be wonky. Okay, so you're going to show these 3 letters, and they're going to tap it out. Now they can tap lots of different ways. They can have their hand on their desk and tap a finger for each sound and then blend it together. They can tap on their arm. They can snap it. They can clap it. Lots of different ways for them to get those 3 sounds and then blend it together. So tap out the word. I would say tap out I would show the letters. I say tap out the word. Students would go can. Right. Then the next one. And they would keep doing that. Again, that's going to be from 15 to 20 of those. Okay. Next, you're going to work on sight words. And so you're going to be displaying not only the sight words that you're introducing this week, but you're going to be reviewing the sight words from the previous lesson. So if you're on week 15, you have a whole bunch of sight words that you need to review. You're not going to review them all. You're going to pick 10 of those. And again, we've incorporated those into slides for you, but you can certainly do this on your own. You just want to make sure that you're constantly reviewing the past and bringing in the new ones. So students are going to be asked to read and spell out the word by tapping and cheering it out. Some of those cheers we talked about last week. So if it's the word said, when they see the word said, they would say said, S-A-I-D, said. Right. And again, they could be I'm doing it with my arms and stuff.
I'm thinking
doing on their arms.
That's my favorite one.
Oh my God, the cowboy. So amazing. So amazing. Okay. So again, these are happening every day. Next, you're going to air write. You're going to select 4 or 5 words in which you're going to air write those. So you're going to write the word on the board, have the students take a picture with their brain. You're going to erase the board, and then you're going to have students write it, without seeing a model. Okay. So they're going to see it, say it. You're going to erase it. They're going to write it. Does that make sense? And then you're going to examine. So you're going to take, again, 4 to 5 words, and you're going to go through and examine those. Now, this is a great time if you're introducing new words. You're going to go ahead and introduce those, but you're going to examine those. So like for the word said, as an example, some of those letters are following a rule and some of them aren't. So what's the first letter? They're going to ask them to tell you from memory. What's the first letter? What's the last letter? What letter comes before? And you're going to be eliciting responses from students. And then you're going to put a heart over those part of that word that you just have to know by heart. So for the example said, the S is following the rule and the D is following the rule, but the AI is not. We just have to know it. So we will put a heart over the AI. Does that make sense? So then students are going to go ahead and, now I have all of this written down, but if you are an Orton Gillingham, trainee, if you're going to some of that training, they have their own version of this as well. Right. So you just follow that. But what you want to do is make it super predictable, but you got to not make it boring too, right? Super predictable. You've got to go fast. And it has to be the same over and over again.
Well, and the thing about making it go fast, and even though it's the same, and even though it's predictable, those are 3 things that I think kind of make it even more fun, because it's something they know they're going to be good at, like the prediction routine, of it, right? And then the routine of it, and then the fact that you're making it fast. Like kids love to have a little bit of a challenge, and when you put the word, a little bit of a drill, race or let's see how quickly we can, like that's the kind of stuff they feed off of. So I love, and my favorite thing about this too is everything you're saying. I'm sitting back and picturing all of the different like big box curriculums that my school went through, right? Like all of this type of training, and I'm using not your mother's sight words now, but like this type of repetition can be done with no matter what order you're teaching your sight words in, no matter what order you've got your letters set up a certain way in your unit, but you think about this, like you're pick some keywords, do the cheers, that can be done no matter where you are in your year right now. Right. So it's one of those things I know all of you teachers are going through more than Dee Dee and I ever did when we were in the classroom. But, as you near a break, there may be Thanksgiving break or Christmas break, or you're coming back, you have some time to prepare. Maybe start thinking about, a couple of these different strategies you want to start incorporating just to see how it goes, as you start to move towards this style.
I would not recommend on day 1 starting at the beginning and going all the way through. Right. I think that would be very overwhelming. what I would do is I would start with maybe the first two things: decoding, encoding sounds. Yeah. That would be it.
Well, and I had one student at a time, and we barely got through just letter sounds because he was done. Like we got to blending, and he's like, I'm good. Let's move on.
So if you have a student like that that's done, then make it shorter. Right. Instead of doing 15 letters, right? Especially if this is a child who has struggled in the past. Yeah. When you get to second and third grade and you've had years and years of not being successful, then it's very hard to sign up for something that feels hard. Right. So you're just going to make it shorter. We're going to do these 5 sounds, especially in kindergarten. That might be all you need to do, totally. Right? You might be doing the 5. And then, go on again and, start where you are, I guess is kind of what I'm trying to say. Right. And if students haven't built the stamina for this yet, give them an opportunity to build the stamina because they're going to have the stamina. Yep. Also, make it easy on yourself because this is all brand new kind of ways of doing things. And you want to be successful just like they do. So pick 2 of these things that you're going to do. And then the next week, maybe add another and another and another. Right. Make it easy on yourself. Okay. So let me go back and recap what we've said so far. You're going to warm up by students looking at the letter, saying B says B, not B. And then I know I have to remind myself. Now the teacher's going to give them a sound and they're going to encode it. So M, they're going to say M says And, at the same time, they could be doing air writing as well, which, it gives them something physical to do. Yeah. Really, really,
well, it reaches all types of learners too. That's the thing. I mean, you're going to have some kids who are on their own air writing. You might have some that are writing on a dry erase board, and then you've got those learners who just need to hear it over and over again. So it's such an easy way to reach all learners.
We really want to make sure that it's a multisensory approach as well. So they're not only seeing it, they're hearing it, they're saying it, they're touching it in some way. Lots of people have different tactile things that you can do. One of them is you could take sandpaper and they could be, taking a crayon, right? And over a piece of paper and writing it. Mm-hmm. So if you imagine you have a piece of paper on something bumpy and you run your crayon over it a few times, now you're going to have on top of the paper, you're going to also have something that you can trace with your finger and have a tactile experience. Right. Does that make sense? Because that wax builds up. So that's also a great way to do it. What I learned in my Orton Gillingham is to go to a craft store and there's like plastic canvas. It's like needlepoint, but not. Oh, it's really hard. People, like your grandma makes tissue boxes out of it, right? So cut those into small little pieces and lay that underneath the piece of paper as the student's writing. And it's going to make those bumps, right?
Oh, that's cool.
Then you can remove that. They can run their finger over the crayon built up wax. That's another thing they can do. Huh. And then after that, you can take the canvas. I'm showing you with my hand. You take the canvas.
So amazed by this.
Okay, so you have the paper on top, right? Right. Okay, you see this? So you have paper on top. Now, after they've done it on they traced it with the paper, now go ahead and flip it. So now the paper's on the bottom and the canvas is on top. They can see through it.
Right.
Because it's holes, and now run their finger across it again. It's another tactile experience. It's a little bit different.
That is cool. You know what else I learned is you can run very fine sandpaper through your die cut machines, like your AccuCut machine. The thin paper. I'm not saying like big paper.
I know.
Thin paper. I did that and I made sets of letters and numbers and sight words. And I said at a conference one time, we're like, now if it ruins your tiles, don't blame Adam. And someone said, no, it'll sharpen the tiles because it's sandpaper. Yeah. It'll sharpen the blades. And I was like, there you go. I'm doing you a favor.
Right. But if you're doing this for your whole class,
no, you can't you're not doing that for
right.
Everything.
So this is a great way for you to have the same kind of experience, just in a different way. Okay. So we've done the see it, hear it, blending, sight word review with cheering it out. Then you're going to do air writing. You're going to only pick 4 or 5 of those words for that. You're going to look closely, 4 or 5 maybe. And then now you're going to have them write it on an erasable surface. And again, that could be shaving cream, yada, yada, yada. When you introduce new words, you're going to really make sure that you just slow it down and notice what letters are making sense, which letters are not. So for the example, for the word said, let's imagine I'm introducing this word and it's January. And I say, okay, how many sounds do we hear? We've been blending a long time now, right? How many sounds do you hear? Said, ed. There's 3 sounds. So I'm going to draw 3 lines on the board. What's the first sound you hear? What's the last sound here? What do you hear in the middle? Mm-hmm. And more than likely, they're going to give you an right? An E. You can write it on there and say, yes, that's exactly the way it sounds. But guess what? That's not how it's spelled. We're going to erase the C. Let me show you what goes here. And then you put a heart over it because that's something you have to memorize. So you want to make sure that, yes, exactly. That's exactly the sound, but that's not how we spell it. Mm-hmm. And you can explain, depending on what grade you're in, you can explain why. Back in the day, it used to be pronounced this way, and now it's not. You can look up the history of that word, the origin of that word. I don't think I would do that really in kindergarten, but anyhow. So when I'm thinking about the sight words that I'm going to introduce, I want to introduce them thinking about the phonics skills that we're focusing on for that week. Right. So if I'm working on, let's say I'm working on the AY chunk, the A sound, I want to make sure I get all of those letters in. So play, way, day, say, may, all of those in, all those sight words that go in that center, that chunk. If I'm thinking about, if I'm going to introduce the word he, and maybe I'm not even going to do the long E in my classroom as a kindergarten teacher until, April, maybe, right? Maybe January, but they need that word. I can introduce that early and make sure that I am teaching all of the E's. So me, he, she, be, we.
C. Well, that's a double E, so that wouldn't, yeah.
That's a double E. So you could put it on there and say, but you could put the SEE, put a little asterisk next to it. So this kind of goes on here because you're building a sound wall is basically what you're doing. It goes here. However, we got an extra E on there. So just looking at your sight word list, instead of just randomly teaching them, you want to break them into phonics kind of subset. So I don't know, the silent E. Mm-hmm. You can go ahead and have all of these different silent E words together. You can do the VE, like have, give. Right. And you can explain, when there's a V and an E, it changes that vowel sound. It's not hey, but it's not give. When we have the V and an E, you could just mention it. You know what? That vowel is not going to be long. It's going to be short. It's like a rule breaker. Right. Instead of making every sight word a mystery of I don't know why, it just is, we just have to explain those.
I was like, you sound like you're going to start singing, I don't know why she
swallowed a fly. So after you've done that, you want to work on some dictation. So you're going to dictate words to them. These are going to be, 3 phoneme words, 4 phoneme words, depends on where you are or what you're teaching. So if you're doing, I think I have some examples written down. I got to look at it, y'all, because I've slept since I went through this. You could do nonsense words or real words. At the beginning of the year, you're going to be doing, CVC words. Then you might be doing words with blends and digraphs, at the beginning and at the end, right? So all of those different things you're going to start to incorporate in that dictation, just depending on where you are in your weekly instruction. So Adam, you kind of looked and you could see week by week what words were there. So you just pick some of those words that are phonetically spelled for them, right? These are words that they should know or have been on target to know for those lessons. You've taught that, right? So now you're going to want to have them to encode it. So many times we hear students or teachers say, my students can read it, but they can't write it. So we want to teach both those skills together at the same time instead of, okay, now we can read it. Now we got to figure out if we can write it. So decoding and encoding simultaneously. So you're going to dictate it. They can do, air write, sand, writing in the sand, gel, like those gel bags, whiteboard or paper and pencil. You want to dictate sounds. You're going to give them 5 or 6 sounds per day for them just to write those sounds down. So we want to do sounds. We want to do decodable words. This is for dictation. Decodable words. Each of these are like 5 to 6 sounds per day. It's a great way for you to stop and check what do they know and what do they not know, right? So as you're walking around your classroom, if you're physical, you can, well, I don't know if that's
if you're physical
together. Let's get physical. But you can see where students are and what they know. Yeah. If you're doing it in virtual, maybe you have them do that in Seesaw. That's a great chance for them to put that in Seesaw for their dictation, yep. Right? You want to make sure that they're using the correct letter formation. So you're going to dictate sounds. You're going to dictate words. And then you're going to give them a decodable sentence. You're going to have them write the sentence. So you'll say, this sentence has 5 words. So draw 5 lines. And then you give them the sentence. Students are going to write the sentence and then mark the sentence. So we want them to be looking for capital letter, make sure it makes sense, punctuation, and spelling. So there's a way that we have them mark that sentence. Whereas they're going to mark the capital letter. They're going to circle the punctuation. Come up with something that works for you. We have some suggestions for you. But basically, that's it for the instruction part. Then we've created decodable books that would work in Seesaw or Google Classroom, and also a paper book if you're wanting to have that as well, where students are going to be practicing those skills, and then they'd be working with a partner. So they're not going to just take it home. They have to read it to a partner, and then the partner's going to sign it off for them. So they're going to be using those books again and again, because we want them again to overlearn it.
Yeah, I'm excited about this. So in my classroom where I'm seeing students just, once or twice a week, I did send it home, but I said, you're going to, find a coach at home that you're going to read this to. And it's funny because I see 2 little boys separately, but they're friends outside of my classroom and they're friends from school. And they both are kind of at the same point. So I started in the same area in the same week. And cool. I said, you know what, Adam just got this book too. So you can maybe, call him or for each other's house. You could read it to each other and you could be each other's coach and practice again and again and again. And they were so excited about that. But I wanted to say one thing as I'm listening to you talk about all of this and hearing, the step-by-step approach and the laying it out with the warm up into the instruction. And it just makes sense. Like it's one of those things that's like, why didn't I come up with this training? Like why didn't we come up with this and then start selling this?
Right.
It just makes sense. I think back to, when I was in the classroom and we'd teach the first letters we were teaching, maybe like TB and M or whatever the first few letters we were. But then in our reading curriculum, we were teaching sight words that had to do with the story we were reading that week, right? And those sight words had nothing to do with the letters or sounds that they had been learning in our phonics and singing book. So this just makes sense.
I wanted to say that I want to be really, really clear. I am not an Orton Gillingham trainer at all. I needed to understand this better because teachers have questions and I don't want to send them down the wrong road. And as soon as I learned this, people were like, please, please, please put something together because my school will not send me for this training. Mm-hmm. I paid for this training. It was like, I don't know, $1,500 or $2,000. I don't remember. It was a lot. Yes. And it's not really what I guess a typical teacher would have disposable income to do, especially these days. Right. So here was my dilemma. Do I have this knowledge? I really can't train people on it, because it's really not, I'm not a certified trainer, but I can share what I know. And my hope is teachers are going to like, this makes sense. I can make a few tweaks. Right. But I also, if they have the opportunity to go to the training, go to the training because that is something that is going to go heads and shoulders way beyond me, way beyond this. But if you're like, my school won't send me yet, I have these students who are failing and I'm feeling like a failure, right? Because that's the worst feeling as a teacher is you have students who are trying, but they're frustrated or they have been trying for so long, depending on what grade. Now they're not even trying anymore. and you're not sure what to do differently. And what I said last time, I'll say it again, is what I learned from my training is that students with something like dyslexia, or other language-based issues, they need to see it a lot more than a student who doesn't have that kind of a learning issue. So, let's assume that, Adam, you are a typical learner, right? No barriers at all. You see something 5 or 6 times and you got it, right? Or you grasp it, right? You've learned something from it, and then you get better and better.
I need to record. Well, we are recording this. I should record you talking about me like that as a student.
You're so good.
I probably wasn't that type of student at all.
Gifted. Adam is gifted. But a student who does have a learning difference, they're going to need to see it 20, 30 times. And so that was the thing that I heard, and I thought, whoa, because I thought, okay, I've given them these lessons, and I'm now in small group, and we've been working on the letters, these 3 letters every day for 2 weeks, and they still don't know it. They might need to just see it more. Yeah. One thing that I think for those students who are your intervention, you have to remember what it's like to walk into something where everybody knows it and you don't, right? You know, how many of you have ever done that? You're like, what on earth are they talking about? They have all this lingo and it's all like very nuanced, and you're like, I have no idea what's going on. And I always imagine that I joined a Mandarin Chinese class where everybody else has been doing 2 years, or maybe even 6 months, or maybe even 2 months. And now I'm the first day.
And you have no idea what they're saying.
And all of that is coming at me. I mean, I can't absorb anything because it's all too much. So look at where your students are. We talk about ESGI. It is a game changer. Do those assessments, figure out what they know, pick what they need to know next, and teach them in chunks that are reasonable. We're not going to say, oh, guess what? In January, we should know all of our letters and sounds. Therefore, I'm going to try to teach them all to you right now, even though you don't know any. Mm-hmm. That's not going to work. You're going to pick the ones that they know, even if it's 2, and add 2 more this week. And next week, see if you can add 2 more. If not, keep with those that you started and just give them more and more and more. I know sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, it's so slow. But if you imagine, if you're trying to give them too much and they're not absorbing it, and it's in January, if it's still too much, in February, they're going to be in the exact same spot. Yeah. So why not give them those moments? Yeah, give them those moments of success.
Yeah, it is tough. And I remember sitting down I think back to, gosh, it makes me think about students I probably failed, that I let down. I picture myself at conferences saying like, well, they don't know these letters, so that's something to work on at home. And really that's something, which is, they need to be, but that's something I should have been working on more in the classroom too. And then listen, we know you guys are stressed for time. We know things are not normal this year, but they're still your babies and they're still your kiddos. And when it's a year, I mean, here's the way I'm looking at this year. When I see, Trisha's going through and other teachers going through, yes, there's a lot of added stress, but I also don't think that there's as many expectations coming down from the top. I think principals.
Maybe for a lot of teachers.
I mean, the principals are doing it right. The principals who understand, and the admin who is doing things the right way. I think they get it, and they're holding the teachers accountable, but they're not pushing a lot more on top of them. That's what I've seen.
Like those benchmarks aren't quite as get her done. Right. It's more like do what you can.
Do what you can and get your kids through it. So any year like this, where yes, you are stressed beyond belief, maybe use this as also a year to reflect and re-energize yourself to see what you can do differently.
Right. And, if you're tutoring students, if you have students that you meet with on an intervention basis, more frequent is better than longer. Right. So, you want to make sure that if you're doing that intervention and you're like, okay, I only really have, 2 hours to do interventions with students, you may try to give, instead of 30-minute chunks, maybe give 20-minute chunks or 15-minute chunks, so that they can, because they need to hear it over and over again. Final thing I'm going to say on that is you may decide, teachers, if you're doing this virtually, to record yourself going through this drill that I just talked about, so that you can send it to parents and say, hey, this is what we did today. Can you help sunshine, work on these particular things, especially if it's your intervention where you have that little bit more privacy. Maybe you've done a breakout room or something where you have that privacy, or, just a one-on-one. Maybe record it and then say, parents, could you go through this part with them? Sit with them, make sure that they're going through this week.
Right. And that's not hard to do at all. I used to do stuff like that for my students. If there was one year where I had like a sickness went through my classroom like crazy, like I had 6 kids in my classroom a whole week. Like I was missing 14 students because things were just going around. Right. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, these kids are going to be so behind when they come back. And because we had a new curriculum, the parents didn't know how to teach the way we were being taught. And so I every day I'd sit down with my phone and I just bought, I think it was like a $20 tripod for my cell phone. And I'd put it on my desk and I say, all right, here's everything we did today in a nutshell. And I would teach the parents, while also kids could watch this too, every letter we covered and the sound, every word we did and how to sound it out, what it looks like, how to write it. And I would do that on my phone. And most of the time I would just do it right in the YouTube app with the live, the recorded video right there. Put it to a private link and just share that link with parents. It's not something.
Was this the beginning of Adam the Vlogger?
It was kind of, yeah. This is nice. It's one of those things that it doesn't need to be an edited video. It doesn't need to look pretty. It's just like you teach every single day. Record yourself and share it out there. And your students are going to love seeing that at home, like seeing you, sharing a message to them at home. So I know you're talking like just do it with a review for parents, but it's also a great one if you have students that are absent, or students who are gone for a long period of time, or students who, a lot of virtual teachers I know, they're only getting maybe an hour a day with them because of their hybrid teachers. I mean, like the hybrid in our school, the students in person are getting the morning, and then the students the afternoon have a call here and there when they can. So, as much as you can record, you're already teaching it, so might as well set up your little phone and record it too.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think especially if you're using something like a platform like Zoom, where it's easy just to record that session, or your idea of just recording it with a tripod. Phones, you can get those little phone tripods pretty cheap. And the first couple ones are going to look a little rough. I mean, I just know from my self video, and then you're going to hear yourself say, "Bah," and then you're going to say,
right.
Uh-oh.
Well, when you talk about recording Zoom too, I think it was when we had Greg Smedley Warren on, he shared a really good tip that was, when he was doing virtual, he wasn't allowed to record the Zoom calls, which I know our school can't do either. I know Tricia is not allowed to record the Zoom calls because then everybody can see everybody and that could get shared anywhere. So Greg mentioned he still did his class. He taught virtually, but he had another camera set up. So he just had his phone set up, or, a video camera, whatever you have set up to recording as well. And that's what you're recording on while you're teaching. So then your students who couldn't make the Zoom call, students who were gone that day, who just need to hear you do it rather than saying, hey, parents, work on this. Now you've got a separate recording of just yourself and not your entire class on screen.
Right. Anybody who's ever seen me talk about reading instruction, reading comprehension this will be a familiar story. But, when the perfect son was in kindergarten, I was going through teacher education school, and the kindergarten teacher said, Matt's doing great with reading words, but he needs to work on comprehension. And can you work on that with him? And I said, okay, but I had no idea what that meant.
Right.
I had no idea. What does that look like with a 5-year-old? Mm-hmm. Right. And here I am, college degree, pretty successful at school. I wasn't like valedictorian, but I kind of had it together. But I didn't know what and I was embarrassed to say, what does that look like? Right. And I'm a pretty confident person. And yet I was embarrassed. So imagine your parents who are maybe some of those, sometimes if the child's not successful, the parents have struggled also sometimes. They're probably not going to know what to do. So if you can show them.
Well, I think parents
so much better.
Yeah, they're not going to know what the word phonics means, or what phonemic awareness or phonological awareness or blending or segmenting. So the visuals for not just the students but the parents is a big one too. And it's one of those things that once you get it and your parents get it, then they can do it, in the car. They can be shouting out words and walking down the sidewalk, whatever it is. Right. But they have to know how to do it first.
They have to know. And think about like for yourself as a library of things that you can go. You have all those videos, later on, you can always, you have a new student who comes in that needs to catch up. I don't know. It's such a resource to have that it would be pretty helpful. So
yeah, I love it. Well, thank you, Didi. I'm so excited to take this into my new student. Like listeners, I really am. I'm so excited about this because when we were talking about this last week and then I was like, all right, I need some more help. Didi's like, well, let's talk about that today. So yeah, I learned a lot from this as well. So thank you. And we look forward to sharing more virtual ideas with you all. We're going to get a principal on and maybe a couple principals, just talk about, tips and strategies from the higher ups and see what we can do to help you guys out this year. One thing I do want to say too is we love your feedback. We love your ratings that you guys are giving. We love the responses. We do look at that. I love seeing those things come through on all the podcast channels. But one thing to remind you is if you have anything that you want from us, if if you're like, gosh, I'd really love to hear you guys do an episode on this or that when it comes to education, shoot us an email, tag us on social media, whatever it may be. Yeah. And let us know. We're always looking to help you guys out. That's the point of this podcast. So we appreciate it and let us know what you need.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, you guys.
Bye.
See you later. Bye.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Classroom Collaborative Podcast.
If you are enjoying these episodes, please make sure that you subscribe wherever you are finding them.
And share and rate it so others can find it as well.
We'll see you guys on the next episode. Thanks for listening.
Bye.